All right, class, welcome to the lecture on Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson. This is one of the greatest dramatic monologues in the English language. Before we even read a single line, I want you to look at John William Waterhouse's painting Ulysses and the Sirens. Here, Ulysses is tied to the mast of his ship, straining against his bonds. The sirens are circling the ship, their claws are gripping the boat. They're both beautiful and terrifying. His men row forward, completely unaware of the chaos happening above them. What you should think about is, why does Ulysses refuse to block out the siren's song? And why does he always seek danger, challenge, and adventure, even at great personal cost? These questions are exactly what Tennyson explores in his poem. Before we analyze the poem, let's talk about how it's constructed. Ulysses is a dramatic monologue, which means we get the inner thoughts of a single speaker. In this case, it's Ulysses himself. Tennyson uses blank verse, unrhymed iambic pentameter. It's the same meter that Shakespeare used in his plays, giving the poem a natural yet grand rhythm. And there is no rhyme scheme, which reinforces Ulysses' stream of consciousness and his restless mind, his restless heart. So, you're probably thinking, why is this important? Why study another one of these old poems? This lack of rhyme scheme and formal structure mirrors Ulysses' free spirit. He refuses to be confined even by poetic constraints. Okay, so let's read the poem first to make sure we got a good run through of it. Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson. It little profits that an idle king by this still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race, that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone on shore, and when through scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vexed the dim sea, I am become a name. For always roaming with a hungry heart, much have I seen and known, cities of men and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. I am a part of all that I have met, yet all experience is an arch wherethrough gleams the untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, as though to breathe were life, life piled on life were all too little, and of one to me little remains. But every hour is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things, and vile it were for some three suns to store and hoard myself. And this gray spirit yearning in desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star, beyond the utmost bound of human thought. This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle, well loved of me, discerning to fulfill this labor, by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and pay meet adoration to my household gods when I am gone. He works his work, I mine. There lies the port, the vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark, broad seas. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine, and opposed free hearts, free foreheads, you and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil, death closes all. But something ere the end, some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with gods. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks, the long day wanes, the slow moon climbs, the deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order smite the sounding furrows, for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down, It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles, whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Okay, so let's first take a look at part one, Ulysses' discontent with Ithaca. In lines 1 through 5, he states, "It little profits that an idle king by this still hearth, among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws into a savage race, that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me." Here in this section, Tennyson is using several poetic devices. For imagery, he has still hearth, barren crags, which give the setting feeling of lifelessness, just like Ulysses does. For diction, we have words like idle, savage, aged, which are harsh, negative words that set the tone. Tennyson also uses alliteration: still hearth, savage race. These sounds emphasize the idea of stagnation. So, how is this relevant? Have you ever felt trapped in a routine, like every day is the same? Well, that's how Ulysses feels. Literary critic A.C. Bradley argues that Ulysses embodies the Victorian belief in progress, never being content with the present, always looking ahead. In part two, in lines 6 through 11, Tennyson writes, "I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that loved me and alone, on shore, and when those scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vex the dim sea, I am become a name." Here, Tennyson uses several poetic devices. He uses metaphor uh, in "drink life to the leaves," which means a winemaking. This is a winemaking metaphor. It means to experience everything life has to offer, even the bitter parts. He uses contrast in the line, "greatly have suffered greatly," which means Ulysses embraces pain as well as joy. And he uses symbolism with the rainy Hyades, which is a stormy constellation. This represents life's hardships. Literary critic Harold Bloom says that this is a fear of irrelevance. Ulysses is afraid of becoming nameless. He's scared of becoming forgotten, rather than a living legend, which is his desire. It's his ambition. So, can you relate to this? Can you relate to how your past achievements define you, but you're still not sure what comes next? That's the same as what Ulysses feels. He doesn't want to be just a memory. He actually wants to keep on moving. In lines 12 through 21, Tennyson writes, "For always roaming with a hungry heart, much have I seen and known, cities of men and manners, climates, councils, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers. Far on the ringing plains of windy Troy, I am a part of all that I have met. Yet all experience is an arch wherethrough gleams that untraveled world whose margin fades forever and forever when I move." Again, Tennyson's using symbolism and metaphor. When he writes, "all experience is an arch," what he's saying is that life is a gateway to new experiences. It's never an end. It's like traveling to that horizon that you never reach as a sailor. He uses the metaphor untraveled world whose margin fades. This means that there's no matter how much you see, there's always more beyond. T.S. Eliot, the poet and critic, believed that this passage reflects the human condition, that we're never satisfied, always desiring more. Have you ever felt like this? That the more you realize you don't know, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't really know that much? That's what Ulysses is saying, that there's always more to see, to do, and become. Lines 22 through 28, "how dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, as though to breathe were life. Life piled on life were all too little, and of one to me little remains. But every hour is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things. Tennyson uses several poetic techniques and literary devices. He uses the metaphor to rust unburnished, which means Ulysses compares himself to a sword that is meant to be used and polished, not left to rust. This implies that stagnation is death to him. He uses contrast, again, as though to breathe were life. He rejects mere existence as being equivalent to truly living. And he uses the poetic device enjambment, where the ideas flow over the lines, mimicking Ulysses's restless mind. Ulysses is not content with simply existing. To him, stopping means decaying. This is a powerful statement about purpose and ambition. Do you think having a purpose is what keeps people alive and motivated? Is having ambition someone's purpose? And is that why people are ambitious? Is it because it gives them purpose in life? Critic Harold Bloom says that these lines are a manifesto for restless ambition, arguing that Ulysses represents the eternal human need to seek more, even when fulfillment is unattainable. That the human spirit always wants. It wants and wants and wants. It consume, consume, consume. Desire, desire, desire. Let's look at lines 29 through 32. Tennyson writes, "And vile it were for some 3 sons to store and hoard myself, and this grey spirit yearning and desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star, beyond the utmost bound of human thought." Here, Tennyson uses the imagery of time, the 3 sons. This might refer to the few years he has left, showing his sense of urgency. He uses simile to follow knowledge like a sinking star. His pursuit of wisdom and adventure is compared to chasing a star that's disappearing over the horizon, reinforcing the idea that he's running out of time. Ulysses fears wasting time. He believes that every moment spent in inaction is a moment lost. Is there ever a point where we should stop chasing dreams and be content with what we have? It's like St. Augustine says in his prayer to God, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee." Critic T.S. Lewis says Eliot saw these lines as, quote, "the embodiment of Victorian idealism," end quote. The belief that one should always strive forward, regardless of age and obstacles. If you're wondering where modern day progressivism began, here's your answer. It started in the 19th century with the Victorian age, where people were just progressing forward with scientific progress, industrialization, innovation, technology, and so on. From the telephone line to the steam engine until today with AI. The assumption of mankind is to just constantly progress, to move forward, because what we're leaving behind is presumably stagnation. So anyway, let's look at lines 33 through 37. "This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle. Well loved of me, discerning to fulfill this labor by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and through soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good." Here, Tennyson is saying there's a contrast between Ulysses and Telemachus. Ulysses is reckless, he's impulsive, always chasing progress, always chasing adventure. Telemachus is patient, cautious, a builder. He's a homebody. He stays home. He's happy. He's content where he is. The diction that Tennyson is using, he uses the word slow prudence, which highlights that Telemachus rules differently through wisdom, not conquest. He also uses the metaphor, subdue them to the useful and the good. Governing is presented as taming a wild land, reinforcing the heroic idea of civilization. Ulysses accepts that ruling Ithaca is not his purpose. He entrusts his son with the responsibility of maintaining order while he seeks something greater. But who do you think is more admirable? Telemachus, the steady ruler, the man who is content, Or Ulysses, the eternal wanderer, the man who's constantly looking, striving for something else, never satisfied. Literary critic Elaine Showalter argues that this passage presents a generational shift between father and son. Ulysses represents the old heroic age, while Telemachus represents a new era of stable leadership. Is that what Tennyson is saying here? Is that we've moved from a more quote unquote stagnant place in relying upon social order and institutions like the church and moving more into a realm of science where we're constantly searching, constantly experimenting with new things? In lines 38 through 45, Tennyson writes, "Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail, in offices of tenderness and pay, meet adoration to my household gods. When I am gone, he works his work, I mine." Tennyson uses irony here. He's saying that Ulysses calls Telemachus blameless, but also makes it clear that he does not want this kind of life. With the division of labor, he works his work, I mine. Ulysses believes his purpose is beyond Ithaca. Again, Ulysses respects Telemachus, but also makes it clear that he is different. He cannot stay and govern. Is Ulysses being wise, or is he being selfish in leaving his kingdom? Critic A.C. Bradley says that this moment reveals Ulysses' justification for leaving. Is he abandoning? He believes his journey is as valuable as Telemachus' rule. So what is Tennyson saying here about the wandering father, the father who leaves, it doesn't stay? Lines 46 through 50, there lies the port, the vessel puffs her sail. There gloom the dark broad seas, my mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and thought with me, yet ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine and opposed, free hearts, free foreheads, you and I are old. Tennyson uses imagery. There gloom the dark broad seas, and that the sea represents the unknown, just as it did in his youth. He uses contrast again, thunder and sunshine. Life has had its hardships and joys, but they always keep going. And then he directly addresses the reader or the listener when he says, "You and I are old." Here he acknowledges his mortality, but he refuses to let it stop him. Ulysses is facing aging head on, but he doesn't see it as a reason to stop. Instead, it motivates him to keep going. A true warrior, a true sailor, a true adventurer, a true hero. Is Ulysses in denial about aging, or does his perspective make him more alive than those who accept old age passively, those who just give up, wither away, and die? The poet critic Wilfred Owen saw Ulysses as both admirable and tragic, calling him, quote, "the man who refuses to die a quiet death," end quote. In the final lines, Tennyson writes, "Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." So here, Tennyson is using contrast again when he says, "Much is taken, much abides." Ulysses acknowledges his aging, but he refuses to stop. Tennyson uses repetition when he says to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield in order to reinforce his relentless drive. And he uses alliteration when he says strong in will. The strength of the sounds mirrors his resilience. Again, T.S. Eliot called these lines the greatest summation of the Victorian ethos, where you never stop striving and you never give in. So, how is this relevant to your life? Why do we read all these old poems? What is the point of it? Do you admire Ulysses' mindset, or is it unhealthy to never accept peace? Are we all in some way Ulysses, always seeking something more, always motivated or compelled by our inner desire, our ambition, our resistance to contentment. And is that where happiness is? Is happiness in that constant striving? Or is happiness in contentment, realizing that you don't really need all of those adventures, all of those things that Ulysses was chasing? So, what do we learn from Ulysses? Tennyson's Ulysses is more than just a dramatic monologue about an aging hero. It's a philosophical exploration of ambition, purpose, and the tension between duty and self fulfillment. Do I stay married or do I go live for myself? That's the kind of thing that people constantly struggle with. The poem raises profound questions about what it means to live fully, especially in the face of mortality. So, is ambition a strength or is it a flaw? When Ulysses says to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield, these are his parting words, his personal philosophy, his call to action. But should we admire this mindset, or does it reveal a dangerous unwillingness to accept limits? Is ambition a strength? Ulysses refuses to stagnate. He is aging, but he doesn't see this as a reason to stop striving. In fact, he embraces the idea that he still has more to accomplish. He is an embodiment of the human spirit's drive for discovery, knowledge, and growth. He will not let old age define or limit him. His mindset aligns with the Victorian belief in progress, always moving forward, always pushing boundaries, always seeking something beyond. Harold Bloom called Ulysses the eternal manifesto of human aspiration. It's a poem that captures the fundamental desire to always reach beyond what we have. But can ambition be a flaw? Is it bad to always want to be the best that one can be? Is Ulysses chasing adventure for the sake of movement without any true purpose? He is leaving behind his responsibilities. He abandoned his kingdom, his family, his people. But is ambition worth it if it comes to such a cost? His crew is aging too. Is he dragging others into a reckless, doomed journey that they no longer have the strength for? T.S. Eliot saw Ulysses' ambition as both inspiring and tragic. He admired the drive, but questioned whether Ulysses was simply running away from his responsibilities, running away from reality. And at what point does this ambition become self-destructive? So, the question that Tennyson wants us to ask ourselves in this poem, in this dramatic monologue, is should we always push forward, as was being assumed during the Victorian era? Or is there wisdom in knowing when to stop? It's kind of like if you've read the novel Frankenstein. Everyone tried to warn Victor Frankenstein against what he was trying to do with creating a new life form. But he kept pursuing it just because he could. It's like today's scientists. Should they continue to tinker with nature the way that they do, just because they can, all in the name of progress? Ulysses rejects the idea of rest. He believes stopping means fading into irrelevance. But is this really true? This is the argument for always pushing forward. Life is meant to be lived fully. If you stop striving, you might as well be dead. Aging doesn't mean giving up. Ulysses is challenging the idea that old age should be about passivity and reflection rather than continued action. Many great minds, scientists, artists, leaders, kept working until the very end. Is that not proof that one should always push forward? Today we see retirement as a time to slow down and enjoy life, but some people like Steve Jobs, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and others never stopped working until their last days. So does stopping mean you lose your purpose? Or does it just mean finding a new kind of fulfillment? Now, consider the argument for knowing when to stop. There is wisdom in accepting change. At some point, ambition might blind us to the fact that we have already achieved enough. Ulysses has already lived a great life. Should he not be satisfied with what he has? Pushing forward for the sake of movement can be exhausting, even self-destructive. Critic A.C. Bradley saw Ulysses' philosophy as a noble but flawed response to aging. He's fighting against time itself, which is a battle he cannot win. If you were Ulysses, Would you stay would you stay home or would you set sail? Many of you who are about to graduate high school and go off to college, and some of you have chosen to stay home, stay close to home, others have decided to go far away. So this is the ultimate question, but there's no simple answer. If Ulysses were to stay in Ithaca, if you were Ulysses and you stayed in Ithaca, you would have a stable kingdom, you'd have a wise son, Telemachus, and a people who need you. You have already achieved legendary status, so why risk it? Maybe the lesson is learning to find meaning in stillness rather than chasing something new. Like St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. Scenario 2, you set sail for one last adventure. If you believe that life is about experiences, not comfort, then setting sail is the only choice. Maybe it's better to die chasing something meaningful than to fade into irrelevance. Ulysses knows his time is short, but rather than waiting for death, he chooses to go out on his own terms. Again, Wilfred Owen admires Ulysses' spirit, but believed that a life spent constantly chasing the next thing can lead to ultimate dissatisfaction. Which one, in your opinion, is the braver one, staying or leaving? So imagine you're a Ulysses, you're at the shore, your ship is ready, the sea is calling. Do you stay and rule, or do you set sail? What do you think Tennyson would want you to do? What do you believe is the right choice?